Hello, and welcome back to Hominid History Hub, the place where curiosity settles in, the lights dim, and science unfolds slowly enough to help you drift toward rest. Tonight, our quiet path takes us far into the southern hemisphere, past every road, forest, and familiar horizon. We're traveling to a place wrapped in silence and sealed beneath endless ice. A place where the wind shapes ridges like an artist working in glass, and where the landscape looks less like Earth and more like a frozen world from another sky. This is Antarctica, the coldest, driest, and most untouched wilderness left on the planet. A realm of extremes, so empty that even sound feels uncertain, as if it hesitates before crossing the open air. Yet in the last decade, this frozen world has sparked something warm in the human imagination. And strangely, it wasn't the penguins, the storms, or the glaciers that ignited it, but the appearance of sharp, dark shapes rising through the ice, shapes that looked geometric, structured, intentional. Some people called them mountains. Others whispered a different word with a kind of awe: pyramids. Whether the formations carved themselves through natural forces or were built by hands long forgotten, the idea alone captured global curiosity. Pyramids in Antarctica, a thought powerful enough to make even the most grounded mind pause, because it asks a question older than written history. What if there's a chapter missing in the story of humanity? What if something once stood here, in a place we now consider unlivable? And what if the ice itself has acted as a vault, protecting that secret for thousands upon thousands of years? Before we go deeper into that thought, take a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're someplace warm, where the idea of ice feels soft and distant. Or perhaps winter has already settled around you, and the wind outside your window hums its own cold song. Wherever you are, picture this. A continent so massive it holds about 70% of our planet's fresh water, so bright it sends half the sunlight back into space, and yet so unknown that entire legends bloom simply from looking at its outline on a map. If this gentle exploration brings you some calm or helps your mind loosen its grip on the day, I'd be grateful if you liked the video or subscribed. It helps this small corner of quiet reach others who might be closing their eyes right now, listening to the same soft voice and the same drifting questions. So settle in. Let your breathing slow. Let the warmth around you soften the chill of the story to come. Tonight, we follow a trail that begins with a handful of satellite images, a few isolated coordinates, and a shape the human mind is wired to recognize. Somewhere between data and dreams, between geology and myth, sits the whisper hidden beneath the ice. It all began the way modern mysteries usually do, with a blurry picture on a glowing screen. In the mid-2000s, a series of satellite photographs started circulating online. They showed a dark triangular peak rising from the endless white of the Ellsworth Mountains. The lines looked sharp, the angles symmetrical, and long before experts could examine them, the word pyramid spread across the internet. And not just one pyramid, but three, spaced miles apart, forming a pattern that some insisted was too deliberate to ignore. Within days, message boards were buzzing. Blogs dissected shadows and slopes. Theories multiplied like snowflakes in a blizzard. Geologists stepped forward with calm explanations. Mountains often take triangular shapes, they said. Wind, erosion, freeze-thaw cycles, and the weight of ice can sculpt stone into angles that look engineered. To them, these formations were nunataks, rocky peaks poking through a sea of ice, common, ordinary, expected. But others weren't convinced. They saw design where randomness should have ruled, smoothness where nature usually leaves scars. The story spread not because it was proven, but because it lingered in that irresistible space between possibility and wonder, a space where our hunger for meaning outruns the facts. Antarctica has always been mysterious. For centuries it was the final blank space on world maps, a cold white unknown at the bottom of the globe. And now, even in an age where satellites watch every inch of Earth, it still offers secrets, or at least the suggestion of them. A mountain can always be explained, but imagination is harder to melt. People began asking, what if Antarctica wasn't always covered in ice? What if,
Long before the continent froze, something else lived here. Not just plants or ancient animals, but people, or something like people, who built structures pointing to the sky just as civilizations across the world have done for thousands of years. The theories branched outward. Some linked the formations to Atlantis, others to visitors from elsewhere.
Others to a civilization erased by a disaster we no longer remember. Every idea found believers, because deep in us there's a desire to see the past not as scattered accidents, but as a pattern that connects Egypt, Mesoamerica, Asia, and maybe even this frozen edge of the world. Still, the scientific explanation hasn't changed. Antarctica is notoriously difficult to study. Storms shut down expeditions, ice shifts, breaks, and buries. Even now, only a small portion of the continent has been studied up close. Beneath the ice lie mountain ranges taller than the Alps, rivers that never see sunlight, and lakes sealed off since before human beings existed. To examine these supposed pyramids in person would mean crossing deadly terrain where one gust of wind can erase tracks instantly. So for now, the mystery remains no deeper than the pixels in a photograph. Yet our fascination refuses to fade, because even if these shapes are nothing more than peaks carved by time, the thought of what might lie underneath stirs something ancient in us, the feeling that we were not the first, that the earth has forgotten civilizations too strange or too grand to survive in memory. Stories of worlds swallowed by water or buried under ice have existed since humans began telling stories. Every new rumor, every odd photograph keeps those old legends breathing. Imagine standing at the base of one of those triangular mountains. The air is so cold it feels sharp against your skin. Ice stretches endlessly in every direction, shining under a sun that barely moves. Nothing makes a sound except the slow crack of shifting glaciers. The continent groans softly beneath your feet. In that silence, it's easy to understand why people see intention in the landscape. The place feels watchful, not alive but aware, like memory itself has settled into the ice. Still, science has its own story to tell. The peaks often claimed to be pyramids belong to the Ellsworth Range, formed tens of millions of years ago when the crust buckled upward. Glaciers sculpted their slopes into sharp angles. The dark patches seen from space come from rock exposed where the ice has thinned. The lines people call edges are shadows and ridges shaped by sun and perspective. In other words, geology doing what geology does, turning slow chaos into patterns that just happen to look meaningful. But humans rarely fall in love with plain explanations. We're drawn to mystery, to the spark that comes from the unknown. A mountain becomes a pyramid because pyramids carry stories. Stories of builders, alignments, rituals, intentions. And the more distant the location, the faster our imagination rushes to fill in the blanks. Antarctica is one of the last untouched frontiers on Earth, and frontiers always grow legends. In truth, the idea of the Antarctic pyramid reveals more about us than about the continent. It reflects our longing for connection to a forgotten past, our refusal to believe that history is complete. When we stare at that frozen emptiness, we're not just looking for structures, we're searching for ourselves, for an origin story big enough to tie all our scattered questions together. Meanwhile, scientists continue drilling into the ice elsewhere, studying cores and ancient air trapped for millennia. What they discover is just as astonishing, though quieter. Climate records preserved in snow, dust from distant eruptions, organisms that survived ages in darkness. The planet remembers everything, even when we do not. Perhaps that's the deeper reason this mystery endures. We want to believe that the ice hides not just stones but stories. If explorers someday reach those peaks and find only rock, some people will be disappointed. Others will find comfort in the clarity. But the wonder will remain, because we were never just searching for a pyramid. We were searching for the sense that the world still holds secrets. Every blurry image keeps that hope alive. As satellites continue to sweep over the continent, the ice keeps reshaping itself, concealing, preserving, whispering. Antarctica doesn't remember us. It doesn't need to. It has survived every climate and every species.
It stands as a reminder that the Earth is the slowest, oldest storyteller we know, one that doesn't use words. When we look across its endless white, we're listening to something ancient, humming beneath our brief, curious lives. The question of the pyramids, like the questions of time, consciousness, or our origins, is another way of asking, who are we? How far back does our story really go? And so the mystery drifts on, from hazy photographs to endless speculation, from skeptics to dreamers, from what science can measure to what wonder keeps alive. Deep beneath that ice, truth sleeps. Maybe it's simple, maybe it's immense. For now, it remains still, waiting for the warmth of human curiosity to reach it. And when the wind slips over those silent peaks,
It's almost possible to imagine the sound, a low ancient echo, like stone remembering sunlight. The gentle whisper beneath the ice. There's something strangely comforting about knowing that the coldest place on earth is also one of the quietest. Beneath skies so pale they blur into the horizon, sound behaves differently. It moves softly, dampened by the thin, dry air. The silence isn't empty. It vibrates softly with the slow breath of the ice itself, expanding and contracting across centuries. Antarctica feels alive, but in a way measured in geological ages, not human seasons. To understand why so many stories bloom from this frozen desert, you have to imagine what it feels like to stand in a landscape that looks endless and bare, yet somehow seems to watch you back. People imagine Antarctica as pure white, an endless sheet of snow under a cold blue sky. That picture is true, but not complete. There are colors there if you wait long enough. Snow that glows a deep, impossible blue. Ice that reflects faint greens from ancient algae trapped inside. And then there's the black. Not the black of night, but of stone exposed against all that brightness. It's that darkness that sparked the first stories. The idea that beneath the blinding white, something older than the ice itself waited quietly. The dark peaks scattered across the continent rise like memories refusing to fade. Some are jagged and rough, others broad and strangely smooth, like the faces of pyramids carved from obsidian. Their sharpness feels intentional, though in truth it's the long, patient work of ice grinding against rock, coincidence shaped into meaning. Still, when you look at those shapes from space, from a satellite gliding silently hundreds of miles above Earth, they seem almost too exact, too sharply defined to dismiss at first glance. Even researchers, people trained to question their own instincts, have admitted that the formations look strangely deliberate. Human minds are built to find patterns, and sometimes even logic needs a second to catch up with what the eyes think they're seeing. Antarctica hides more than most places on Earth because its ice isn't just frozen water. It moves, flows, shifts, and reshapes the land beneath it. That slow, relentless movement has buried an entire hidden world. Beneath the frozen shell lies a landscape more dramatic than anything on the surface. Valleys, peaks, canyons, and entire mountain chains sealed under miles of ice. One of the most astonishing discoveries came in the 1950s when scientists using radar realized that a massive mountain range, taller in places than the Alps, was completely entombed below. They named it the Gamburtsev Mountains. Imagine an entire mountain chain nobody had ever seen, preserved in perfect darkness for millions of years. When people entertain the idea of secret pyramids beneath the ice, they're often reaching toward the same unease and wonder the Gamburtsev discovery stirred. A feeling that something immense, something structured, might still be waiting in the deep cold, unseen but not erased. The ice above those hidden mountains is over 1 million years old. Layer pressed upon layer, it traps bits of ancient atmosphere inside tiny bubbles. Scientists drill into that ice and pull out cores, long frozen cylinders that act like diary pages written by the planet. Every grain of dust, every chemical trace, every air bubble tells a story of past climates, ancient eruptions, and even particles drifting in from space. Antarctica holds Earth's memory in a way no other place does. The idea that it could also shelter remnants of something human, something built, feels romantic, yes, but not entirely unreasonable in a place where time moves so slowly that even air is preserved. Imagine walking across that frozen world. The sun circles overhead without ever dipping below the horizon, and shadows move in a slow, dreamlike sweep across the surface. There are no trees, no landmarks, nothing to anchor your sense of distance. Just the steady crunch of your boots on hardened snow, a sound like faint static underfoot. Your breath drifts into the cold like smoke, and every so often you hear the soft, brittle crack of ice adjusting to tiny changes in temperature. Scale becomes meaningless. You could be walking over a glacier, or over the roof of something lost beneath miles of frozen time. The brightness bends perception so much that explorers once thought they were approaching mountains, only to find them vanish into nothing. Hard shadows on the horizon drift away as you step closer, dissolving like mirages in a desert of white. Early expeditions described shapes rising from the horizon, towers, cliffs, even entire phantom mountain ranges. The atmosphere is so cold and so layered that it bends light unusually, projecting distant formations over the curve of the earth. A peak hundreds of miles away might appear as a floating pyramid in the distance, but try to walk toward it, and it slides away, disappearing like breath on glass. Antarctica rearranges itself as you look at it, turning certainty into confusion. That trick of the light isn't limited to shapes. Time distorts too. Without a normal sunrise or sunset, days bleed together. Hours lose their meaning. Eventually, you stop trusting your internal clock. Even your own voice feels strange, too loud for such a quiet place. In that silence, your thoughts echo. Details you'd ignore anywhere else suddenly feel significant. The way frost gathers on your eyelashes, the faint pop of snow settling under pressure, the hollow, wind-shaped hum that rises when air passes over a crack in the ice. Spend long enough in that emptiness, and your imagination starts filling the blanks. The mind whispers possibilities it would normally dismiss, that maybe, somewhere beneath all that ice, something ancient is still waiting. There are regions of Antarctica no one has ever seen directly. Even with satellites, huge expanses remain untouched. Beneath some areas lie subglacial lakes sealed away for millions of years. Lake Vostok, one of the largest, sits under nearly 4 kilometers of ice. Scientists drilled into it slowly, afraid of contaminating an ecosystem that hadn't been exposed to the air since long before humans existed. What they found stunned them: microbial life that had evolved in total darkness, surviving under crushing pressure. Life that seemed almost alien, shaped by isolation rather than sunlight. If life can survive that environment, silent, sealed away, and ancient, then imagining other kinds of preserved secrets doesn't feel outrageous. Nature has already proven it can hide and protect what it buries. Those who believe in the Antarctic pyramid theory often point to these isolated lakes and caverns as potential shelters, imagining a time long before the cold, when Antarctica was warm, forested, and alive. Geologists have shown that around 90 million years ago, the continent was indeed lush, covered in greenery and home to dinosaurs. Fossilized wood, pollen, and even the remains of ancient creatures confirm it. Back then, Antarctica sat farther north and was connected to the land masses that would become South America and Australia. Only when continental drift pulled it south did the cold begin its slow takeover. To some minds, the timeline leaves just enough space for myth to settle in, for the idea that maybe, just before the deep freeze, something intelligent walked those lands. But scientists studying the fossils and soil find only the marks of natural processes: no fires, no metals, no tools. The ice records everything, and its pages show no sign of lost civilizations. Still, the fascination doesn't fade. Even when evidence says no, the imagination murmurs maybe. Antarctica is built for that kind of wondering. Empty white space and stark black peaks invite people to project meaning onto them. The so-called Black Pyramids fall into that mental territory, shapes that sit somewhere between the known and the hoped for. They are symbols now, representing hidden potential, the desire for something extraordinary beneath the surface. Even scientists who dismiss the theories admit the peaks have a strange, quiet beauty. There's poetry in the idea that erosion and sunlight can produce forms so perfect they ignite global speculation. It shows that mystery and science aren't enemies. They're two sides of curiosity. One gathers facts, the other asks questions. Together, they drive us forward. If the Antarctic pyramids turn out to be nothing more than mountains carved by wind and ice, their allure doesn't vanish. It simply shifts. We're left asking why we wanted them to be more in the first place. Seen from above, the continent looks like a different world. Endless white stretches out in every direction, cracked by deep fractures where glaciers meet the sea. From space, those fractures look like frozen rivers or veins. Sometimes dark patches appear, exposed rock breaking through the ice. Those nunataks, black against the white, can look like ruins or monuments to anyone scrolling quickly through satellite images. And even without mythology attached, they carry a heavy ancient presence. They are reminders that the planet is always sculpting itself, often with eerie symmetry. Stand there long enough, if a person could, and the boundary between perception and belief would blur. Your eyes would insist on meaning, your instruments would insist otherwise, and somewhere between the two, your imagination would find room to wander. Maybe that's why the story persists. It's not really about what is or isn't buried there. It's about the possibility that the world still has room for the unknown, that something might remain beyond the reach of cameras, drones, or radar. Modern explorers carry advanced equipment, radar sweeps, drones that skim the ice, sensors that read minute shifts in magnetic fields. Yet even they confess to moments of awe. They find valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, lakes untouched by sunlight for millions of years, and odd magnetic readings that don't quite match expectations. Every anomaly sparks new theories. What if the readings hint at something artificial? What if the geometry isn't random? Even the most rational minds pause, if only briefly, with that question. For now, the Black Pyramids remain what they've always been, shapes in the snow, glimpsed through distance and imagination. But they've achieved something remarkable. They've reminded the world that mystery still exists, that not every corner of Earth has surrendered its secrets. In a time when information feels endless and everything seems documented, that realization is strangely comforting. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the sunlight hitting the ice just right, turning it into glass. Imagine a shadow rising from the horizon, sharp and unlikely. For a second, you might believe it was carved by ancient hands. Then the wind shifts, the mirage softens, and the illusion slips away. But your mind holds on to the image anyway. Maybe that's the real secret Antarctica carries. Not a hidden city, not a forgotten civilization, but the reminder that wonder hasn't left us. That even in a world measured by satellites and sensors, there are still places that feel untouchable. Somewhere under that endless white lies something, maybe only stone, maybe only silence, but something waiting all the same. And above it all, the wind moves across the ice, brushing against the dark peaks like a whisper, reminding us that the unknown is still out there, patient and cold and full of possibility. What else might be resting there, unseen, unmeasured, still waiting beneath the ice that never forgets? And if those formations are only mountains, why do they still feel intentional, almost placed against the empty sweep of the surrounding ice? It's hard to fault anyone for wondering. Antarctica is not a place that reveals anything willingly. Everything beneath its surface is sealed in a frozen archive. Meteorites, ancient air, fossils, sediments, layers of memory that could be hiding anything. If there had been a civilization here once, we wouldn't know for centuries. The ice is too deep, too vast, too careful with its secrets. There's also that very human desire to find connection. Across the world, pyramids rise in places that had no contact with each other. Egypt, Sudan, Mexico, China, Indonesia. Entire cultures separated by oceans somehow created the same shape, broad at the base, tapering to the sky, a structure that feels permanent, spiritual, almost inevitable. It's the oldest expression of our instinct to reach upward. So the idea that a similar form might appear at the bottom of the world, whether carved by nature or imagined by ancient hands, feels strangely natural. But Antarctica changes the rules. There are no lost cities here, no roads, no monuments, no trace that humans ever lived on this continent before the modern age. The oldest life found in its depths is microscopic, sealed inside ice so old it predates our species entirely. Still, people wonder, because we've learned again and again that history isn't a closed book. Every so often, a discovery rewrites what we thought we knew. Tools older than the textbooks claimed, societies more advanced than we imagined, timelines stretched further into the past. Scientists studying ancient Antarctic climate have shown that around 90 million years ago, the continent was warm and thriving. Fossilized wood, pollen, and plant material recovered from sediment cores suggest that forests once grew in places now buried under miles of ice. Trees stood through long polar days and even longer nights, adapting to cycles no modern forest endures. But as Antarctica drifted south and separated from warm ocean currents, the transformation began. Ice spread slowly, swallowing everything. If anything existed there, any trace of life, even a culture we've never known, it now lies entombed deep below, unreachable for lifetimes. Myths of lost civilizations echo through time. Stories like Atlantis, Lemuria, or Mu may be inventions, or they might be fading memories of real societies erased by rising seas or shifting continents. Dismissing them outright is easy, but myths often begin with a sliver of truth. Flood legends found in ancient cultures might reflect real events from the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers drowned coastlines and erased villages. So when people imagine that pyramids could exist beneath Antarctica's ice, they aren't only fantasizing. They're remembering that Earth has buried human stories before. As curiosity spread online, researchers examined the data closely. Some pointed out that the shapes were less symmetrical than they first appeared. Angles differed, edges were rough, and the distances involved, often several miles, made human construction nearly impossible. Others explained how the low polar sun casts long shadows, exaggerating simple ridges into something dramatic. A slight dip becomes a doorway. A slope becomes a wall. Something that looks intentional from orbit becomes uneven and ordinary once mapped in 3 dimensions. Still, the fascination refused to fade. Every explanation left just enough space for wonder. Satellite photos answer some questions, but each one creates new ones. Look long enough and another dark edge appears, another sharp line, another shape that seems too exact to ignore. Antarctica is a vast canvas of white, and the mind can't help drawing its own conclusions on that blank slate. Each year brings new expeditions, new tools, better equipment. They scan deeper, measure with more precision, map with higher resolution. Yet even with all that technology, the feeling persists that the next breakthrough could reveal something unexpected. Maybe it's the landscape itself. Even stripped of myth, Antarctica feels alien. The sunlight spins in circles all summer, casting a strange, endless twilight. In winter, darkness devours the horizon for months, a darkness so absolute it seems to swallow sound. Within that rhythm of extremes, time feels suspended. The ice stretches in every direction, interrupted only by those dark, geometric ridges rising from the snow. Mountains, sculpted by slow, relentless forces, are mistaken for monuments. The earth is still alive beneath all that stillness. Glaciers shift, rock is carved, valleys deepen. The planet continues shaping itself without witnesses. Expedition crews sometimes speak of a superstition that the ice remembers footsteps. They joke that if you walk far enough in one direction, you'll eventually cross the path of someone who came long before, even if thousands of years separate you. It's just a story, but it reflects the truth that Antarctica feels ancient, not just old, but eternal. Every gust of wind carries a sense of history. Every ridge looks like it has seen more than we can imagine. Scientists call this the continent's duality, its ability to be both understood and unknowable. They can explain the chemistry of the ice, the physics behind glacial erosion, the geology of the mountains, but none of that captures the feeling of standing before one of those stark black formations, with the wind roaring and nothing but silence beyond. It's not fear, it's reverence. a reminder that Earth itself can deceive us without meaning to, shaping illusions with nothing more than time and pressure. So people keep returning to the images, not because they prove ancient builders existed, but because they prove something else. Curiosity never freezes. Even when science gives an answer, imagination keeps an ember burning. It whispers that there might still be corners of the world we haven't fully understood. Every pixel in a satellite photo contains a record of millennia: wind, erosion, light, shadow. Look long enough and the lines blur. Fact blends with fascination. Shadow blends into slope. Possibility becomes a question rather than an answer. The truth in Antarctica is never hidden. It's layered like the ice itself. Some see geology, some see intention. Both are responding to something real. Whether shaped by ancient hands or by the planet's own slow breath, those formations remind us that structure and mystery often coexist. Earth is full of places where wonder and reason meet. Antarctica is simply the purest example. And as satellites continue their silent watch, new images arrive. Another angle, another shadow, another pattern that looks slightly too perfect, another spark of speculation. What if these aren't only mountains? What if something more lies buried beneath all that white? The answers move as slowly as the ice. They shift, they settle, they wait. But for now, the dark shapes standing above the endless snow hold their silence. They are both illusion and clue, depending on who's looking. And as the ice breathes in the polar wind, those black peaks stand like quiet guardians of the oldest conversation we've ever had with our planet, a conversation built on wonder. If we could peel back the ice layer by layer, the land beneath would read like a book written in stone. Every fracture, every ridge, every sharp angle is part of a story stretching back hundreds of millions of years. The pyramid-like forms that ignite so much imagination are just the punctuation marks of that story. Beneath them lies the slow, patient grammar of Earth itself. Time here moves differently, not in days or decades, but in weight. Antarctica's ice isn't just a frozen surface. It's a mass so heavy it reshapes the crust beneath it. In places the ice is nearly 3 miles thick, pressing down with a force that bends rock, sinks valleys, and alters the land. That pressure is constant, ancient, and utterly indifferent. It sculpts without pause, without witness. And somewhere in that immense silence, the mystery endures. Geologists refer to this slow sinking of the ground as isostatic depression. The land literally pressed downward under the enormous weight of ancient ice. It means that Antarctica, despite appearing frozen in time, is constantly shifting. Whenever the ice sheet grows or retreats, the bedrock below bends and adjusts, responding to the planet's long, slow heartbeat. The ridges, the jagged silhouettes, the strangely perfect angles we see from above are never fixed. They're sculpted by pressure, time, and the endless movement of ice. Glaciers behave like master carvers, dragging grains of rock across the surface as they creep forward. Their motion grinds, polishes, and sometimes fractures the ground beneath them. What looks like a straight edge might actually be a crack that's been smoothed over countless ages. What seems like a geometric angle may just be the meeting point of two ancient valleys, when sunlight strikes at the right moment and shadows fall just right. The landscape can appear designed rather than naturally formed. The ice shapes the continent, but it also conceals it. More than 90% of Antarctica's true surface is hidden from human sight. The version we imagine, flat, white, almost featureless, is just a surface mask. Beneath it lies one of the most dramatic, chaotic landscapes on Earth, carved long before humans ever appeared. We know this not from looking, but from listening. Scientists use radar to send signals through the ice, then study the echoes that return. From this invisible soundscape, they construct digital models of a world no one has ever walked. When researchers first used this technique in the mid-20th century, they stumbled upon a discovery that changed everything. Deep under the East Antarctic ice sheet lies the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, an entire hidden range as large and tall as the Alps. Its highest peaks rise thousands of meters, its valleys deep enough to cradle ancient lakes. Yet the entire system has been sealed beneath ice for millions of years. Its existence is still one of Earth's great geological puzzles, how such mountains formed, survived, and remained untouched for so long. Some of the ridges in that buried range look eerily similar to the shapes seen in satellite photos, the same sharp lines and pointed peaks. And it makes sense. The same glacial forces that carved the hidden Gamburtsev range are shaping Antarctica right now, grinding, freezing, thawing, repeating over and over again. Over immense spans of time, this slow cycle produces features that appear intentional. Those knife-edged ridges scientists call arêtes, the spear-like horns, and the pyramid-shaped nunataks. These are all the result of glaciers chipping away at the rock from multiple sides. When several glaciers erode a central point, each one scoops out a bowl-shaped hollow called a cirque. Where the cirques meet, they leave behind a pointed summit that looks almost engineered. The Matterhorn in the Alps is one of the most famous examples, created by the same process. Antarctica has countless similar peaks, most of them barely detectable beneath snow glare. It's easy to understand why such forms spark the imagination. With enough time, nature often creates shapes that feel deliberate. A cliff can resemble a face, a mountain can mimic a monument. The line between natural formation and human design often comes down to nothing more than intention, or our assumption of it. But Earth doesn't need intent to form beauty. It only needs time, and time leaves patterns behind. Every ridge, every valley in Antarctica owes its existence to repeated freeze-thaw cycles. Water slips into microscopic cracks, freezes, expands, and slowly forces the rock apart. Over millions of years, the tiniest changes accumulate into enormous features. The slowest processes end up creating the sharpest edges. That's the paradox of this icy continent. It looks newly carved, yet it is staggeringly old. The ice sheet itself has grown and shrunk again and again throughout Earth's history. Each expansion scrapes the land clean. Each retreat reveals a slightly different version of the continent. If you could watch a time-lapse spanning millions of years, the mountains would seem to rise and fall like breathing. Valleys would widen, peaks would sharpen, shadows would drift as Antarctica redraws itself endlessly. Yet some features endure through all this change. A handful of peaks have remained exposed long enough to accumulate dark coatings of dust and life, tiny microbes that survive even in brutal cold. These thin patches soak in sunlight and stand out dramatically against the surrounding ice. From above, they can look like black triangles, crisp and geometric. To a satellite, they may resemble tunnels or markers. To geologists, they're simply evidence of survival in one of the harshest places on Earth. And when you consider it, the idea of pyramid-shaped mountains in Antarctica isn't really surprising. The planet constantly builds triangular forms. It's the shape gravity favors, whether that shape appears in a dune, a rock pile, or a towering mountain. Over time, erosion forces tall structures to taper naturally. The result is a universal geometry carved not by intention, but by the quiet rhythm of nature. But what keeps these Antarctic formations in our minds isn't just their scientific explanation. It's the blend of fact and mystery, of cold logic and that lingering sense of wonder. Because in a place as remote and untouched as Antarctica, even the truth feels like something out of a forgotten story. We know exactly how ice sculpts the world around it, but the moment we notice symmetry in a landscape, something inside us pauses. Symmetry makes us think of intention, and intention suggests meaning. It's not that we doubt science, it's that we want the world to feel like it's speaking to us. A random, uneven ridge feels cold and distant. A perfect triangle, even if created by chance, feels like a signal. Human beings rarely witness the patience of stone firsthand. Our lives move too quickly to see how slowly the earth works. We count time in years, sometimes centuries. The planet counts in millions. To the earth, we're little more than passing weather, here briefly, noisy for a moment, then gone. The rocks beneath Antarctica have been shifting and settling since long before any living creature had eyes to see them. They've survived drifting continents, reversing climates, and entire ecosystems rising and disappearing. That's why imagining something human buried beneath all that ice feels so unlikely. Our timelines don't compare. Stone waits forever. Civilization flashes by and fades. Yet Antarctica has a way of leveling everything. It preserves without caring what it protects. A meteorite and a piece of ancient pottery would last the same way, locked in ice, pressed under weight, perfectly quiet. Many of the oldest meteorites ever found on Earth were discovered here because the ice slowly carries them toward the surface like a conveyor belt. Some have been preserved for hundreds of thousands of years and look like they fell yesterday. When researchers pick them up, they're touching fragments from the solar system's beginning. So the idea that something else, whether human-made or from another intelligence, might also be hidden in the ice isn't impossible. It's simply unproven. Every discovery in Antarctica starts with an anomaly, a strange echo on radar, a spike in magnetic readings, an unusual shape in a satellite image. Most of these turn out to be ordinary features, but not all. Beneath the ice, scientists have uncovered entire networks of liquid lakes connected by channels. They've mapped regions warmed from below by volcanic heat, slowly melting ice upward. They've even found mountains older than the continent itself, remnants from a time before Antarctica moved to the bottom of the world. The more scientists learn, the clearer it becomes that this frozen world isn't still at all. It's layered, active, shifting in slow motion. And that slow motion is what fuels the mystery. A formation visible in one satellite photo might vanish a year later, covered by fresh snow or distorted by moving ice. What looks stable from above is actually flowing, flexing, reshaping itself like a river made of time. Over centuries, a mountain can appear to drift, not because the rock moves, but because the ice drags its shadow somewhere new. It reminds us that every clean angle or dark shape we see from orbit is only a temporary moment, one frame in a story that's always changing. The next generation of satellites will capture a new version of the landscape, and the debates will start all over again. If Antarctica teaches us anything, it's that Earth never hurries. Its processes unfold on vast timelines that ignore our expectations. When we speak of pyramids and lost civilizations beneath the ice, we're really talking about ourselves, about the speed with which we build things and how quickly we forget them. The planet doesn't forget. It recycles, it compresses, it protects what it covers. The ice sheet isn't hiding anything out of malice. It's holding it, waiting for the right conditions to reveal it again. So those dark peaks persist, suspended between geology and myth. They're the visible breath of a world sculpting itself long before humans imagined sculptors. If the ice had a voice, it might tell us that beauty doesn't require intent, that a million years of patience can produce something that looks precise. That time itself is the greatest artist. As the wind glides across those ridges, shifting thin layers of snow from one slope to another, it adds another faint line to the story, another page in a book that will outlast us. The pressure of the ice pushes downward. The stone beneath holds its ground, and somewhere